Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Making Action Happen, Halloween edition. This is the third time we've done this. I'm Sara Blackhurst.
I am Brian McCain.
And I'm Micah Espinosa.
For the purpose of this special episode, it's Brian Dastardly McCain. So some of you who know me fairly well know my favorite question is, what good stories do you have for me? So I asked Micah and Brian to tell us some good stories for this Halloween edition. It's going to be fun. So I'm going to start with Micah. Micah, what good stories do you have for me? Now, wait, let me say that the story I've asked him to tell is a little bit personal. Somewhat personal?
Vaguely personal.
Vaguely personal.
Well, personal connection. Because everyone wants to know, what famous people they're related to, what kings or queens they have in their family tree. I have Colorado's first serial killers in mind. So every single time I go to the San Luis Valley and I introduce myself as Micah Espinosa, one of the first questions I get is, are you related to the Espinosa brothers? And the answer is yes. History remembers them as the Bloody Espinosas because they are still Colorado's most prolific murderers in the history of the state. So, Brian, have you heard of the Espinosa brothers?
A little bit. I know a little bit about them. And then obviously we've talked about it, but up until recently, I did not know. Like, who are they? Where are they at? What'd they do? Who'd they kill? What's their reign of terror in Colorado?
There was a lot to it. Well, and what's really funny is, so I've read a ton of articles about it. So, of course, I first heard about the Espinosa brothers in kind of like, just from my grandmother.
Right.
From our grandmother.
Yes.
And she actually told us, I think, kind of different versions of the same story, maybe probably to protect one or the other's feelings somewhat. I don't know. We got different versions of the story.
Yeah. So, but you were pretty little when she was telling that story. So how old was...
I think the first time I had her actually tell me the story, I was probably in high school.
Okay. So that makes sense. I didn't even know about them, just kind of vaguely in passing. And then when I was going to school at Adams, it got brought up, and we kind of joke around because there's two brothers and we call you the Espinosa brothers. And then we were told that wasn't appropriate to call you guys the Espinosa brothers. So then we were kind of curious as to what that meant. So there's a video, I have a video somewhere of, we didn't realize, or she didn't realize that she was being taped, but we set the camcorder on the table and let Grandma talk about the Espinosa brothers. So it's there somewhere, but this is sort of from the family perspective and then the historical accounts, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell how about my amalgamated version of the story.
Do that, and I'm looking it up on Wikipedia right now too, so I might have some questions.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Because there's what's really funny is the more articles you read, like none of them agree entirely on the details. Even I found out recently, even down to the names, there's some discrepancy about particularly the nephew. So the Espinosa brothers, there was Felipe Espinosa and Vivian Espinosa, are the brothers. So they're a few years apart, and they lived in the San Luis Valley. And even there's some discrepancy about where exactly. Mostly they say it's in an area called San Rafael. Okay. And so they lived there, and their reign of terror started in the 1860s. Now, you have to understand, in the course of a single generation, these guys went from being under Spanish sovereignty to being Mexican citizens to being American citizens.
Correct.
Going through from the 1840s to the 1860s. And so now the Civil War is going on, and so the version of the story we had heard, so there's all these Hispanic people living in the San Luis Valley, and with westward expansion, there came more and more white people to the San Luis Valley, and the laws had changed multiple times, the tax had changed multiple times, and the Colorado Territory wouldn't even translate the Constitution or anything into Spanish for them to understand the laws. And so at some point, U.S. soldiers showed up and basically burned down some of the houses, stole everything from these guys. The story that we had been told was that while the men were away, these guys showed up and, killed some people, raped the women, stole everything, and that's what started this rampage. So not very long after that, Felipe decided, and he believed he had been visited by the Virgin Mary and was told to kill 100 Anglos for every one of his family members that were killed. There were 6 of them that were killed.
And the Virgin Mary looked remarkably like Grandma Gold.
Maybe. We'll have to post a picture somewhere of Grandma Gold. There's a very fun, an interesting picture of this woman who Sarah and I believe may have encouraged this retaliation. So so they were going through, and they did it all through the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. They went all the way up to by Fairplay, Cripple Creek, up by Old Colorado City,
Leadville,
Hardscrabble, just that whole area.
Florence.
All around Canyon City. I kind of didn't realize that until recently, how much happened right around Canyon City. And I think the other thing you guys don't get enough credit for is they were incredible shots. I read one story about when these Union soldiers first showed up there, or when they came back a second time, the Espinosa brothers attacked the Union soldiers with rifles, with pistols, and even with bows and arrows. I don't know how they learned the skill set, but they had it.
I think that happened in one of the homeless encampments here in Pueblo not too long ago.
With bows and arrows?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an effective
Sort of
weapon.
bows and arrows.
Sort of reclaimed bows and arrows.
It's not funny, but it is, because the story's been so, it was so pumped up in the newspapers, and in Leadville, the Leadville newspaper loved this story.
Well, there was, I think, there was a lot of fairly new newspapers in the state at that time, so it was a new territory. Mm-hmm. And so I think they were trying to drum up sales as part of it. So the story got blown out of proportion regardless of how you look at it.
So old-timey clickbait?
Old-timey clickbait, the original clickbait.
So, and interesting, I'm just reading here, it was Tom Tobin, who, I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Tobin.
Yeah.
He was a tracker here.
We are a little bit.
Yeah. He's the one that tracked clickbait down, supposedly.
Yeah, so what happened? So this, and only went on for a few months. The way the story goes, it makes it sound like it took place over the course of years. It was only several months that this took place. And these guys, brutal killings. One of the first killings, they shot the guy, and then they split his head open with an axe, and crushed his skull with apparently like the backside of this axe and stuff.
Thanks.
One of the killings, they supposedly carved a cross in this guy's chest, ripped his heart out. It was brutal the way they did this.
So here's what was interesting to me, and what Grandma Mom brought up was that, and she said it several times, that like you said, the killings took place within a very short time frame relative, but then they'd have one here, and then the next day another one would be here. Not only would the Espinosa brothers would have had to be incredible shots, but they must have been ride like the wind. It would have been ridiculous for them to actually.
Well, and just the actual physical possibility of them committing all the ones they've gotten credit for, it's not possible. And some numbers go as high as over 100 killings. The more accurate numbers seem to be somewhere between 35 and 38 killings that they actually could have committed. But yeah, there were several killings into it before they ever even got identified, because there were several killings in it before they missed.
Yeah.
They were shooting guys straight between the eyes, in the head, back of the head. And they were pretty, a lot of them were miners' camps where one guy was by himself at a sawmill was the first killing. But yeah, so he believed that he needed to kill 600 Anglos, so they went on this mad rampage. And then eventually this guy, Tappan, who was sent out from Fort Garland, they tracked the Espinosa brothers down. So there was Felipe's the older one, Vivian's the younger brother, and they saw their horses. They had hobbled the horse. They tied up the horses' feet so they couldn't run away.
Yeah, tell us who Tappan was.
He was a Union soldier. He was at Fort Garland, and so they spotted the horses. So they kind of snuck down in there, and Vivian came out to actually untie the horses, and that's when they shot him, and he fell down. Well, he got shot in the side or something. Fell down, grabbed his pistol, and then started firing back, and then someone shot him in the head or the face. They, again, they kind of debate it. And then Felipe ran off and then came back, ran into the trees, came back out and fired a couple times, didn't hit anybody, and then disappeared for a couple months after his brother died.
It also said that he found right after that his 14-year-old nephew named Jose.
Yeah.
To resume the rampage.
So they went back. So Vivian died. Felipe goes into hiding for a few months. Some people thought he might have gone back to Mexico, but he actually went back just to the San Luis Valley, and he was actually hiding with his family and friends and kind of moving around with them. And then, they went and got his nephew, who was, and again, some reports say 14, 17, 16, but teenager, grabbed him.
A kid.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I guess I should back up. When Tappan, when they killed Vivian, they actually cut off his head and took it back to Fort Garland. And I read a report that there was actually a widely known doctor who kept the bleached skull on his desk for years.
Yeesh.
So then it
was a different time.
Yeah. So then he goes back and gets his brother. Oh, we'll get to that here in a sec too. This is where it kind of gets really funny. Funny. That's not the right word. So they go on another kind of killing spree. Eventually they sent Tobin out, and there's reports that Tobin actually would have known the Espinosa brothers
very well,
intimately. Yeah. He would have known them very well, to where he would have known where they would have gone and known who would have been helping them. And
it's interesting to note that Tobin was married to one of Kit Carson's daughters.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like a famous tracker, bounty hunter that kind of pelled around here in the Pueblo area for years.
Yeah. And there's some great pictures of him too, where he's wearing like what we would like very traditional, like Native American stuff with the fringe and beadwork and everything.
Oh yeah. He was a mountain man too. That was the big thing. Like all the kids in Pueblo back in the early part of the century, last century, he was like the rock star here. Like,
right.
You want to be like him. You want to be the mountain man and bounty hunter.
And he spoke Spanish and stuff. He would have been speaking Spanish with these guys. And there's even some reports that he actually caught the nephew, whose name is Jose Vicente, that he caught Jose first, got him drunk with tequila, and got him to lead him back to the camp. There's one of those reports out there too. But either way, Tobin found their camp. He had a few guys with him, including a Mexican kid. And it's interesting to note, they actually, through all this rampage, they was all white people. They killed one. There's one report they killed a Mexican during the very first standoff with the soldiers. Other than that, it was all white men. But yeah, so they saw some crows circling. They actually, because they had stopped a wagon that was being hauled by 2 oxen, and the Espinosa brothers killed one of the oxen for food. These soldiers who were with Tobin saw the crows circling, followed those, found him cooking this meat or whatever. When Felipe stood up to stretch, Tobin shot him, and he actually fell into the fire. And then so he screamed for his nephew Jose to run. Jose starts shooting back. Felipe pulls himself out of the fire, grabs his gun, and just starts firing blindly, like couldn't see. We'll start shooting back. I don't know if he hit any. I think he hit one person. And then they killed him. They killed Felipe and Jose on the spot there. And then same thing, cut their heads off, put them in a burlap sack, took them back to Fort Garland. And later, right after that, they actually put the heads of Felipe and Jose in glass jars, and sent them back to Denver, sent them to the state capitol building.
Which it doesn't make sense, but because they threatened to kill the governor too, right?
They threatened to kill the governor.
They were going to kill 600 Anglos, and then all the way up to the governor.
Yeah. So John Evans was the governor at the time. Basically said, give us back all of our. They demanded 5,000 acres back and all their property, and said if we don't get it, we're going to kill the governor. So they actually sent their heads back in glass jars, and they were housed in the Capitol up until the 80s. And reportedly, the Espinosa brothers, there was reports all the way up until that point that they were haunting the Capitol building.
Where did they keep these heads in the Capitol?
I guess in a vault underground is what I've heard.
Well, there's a basement down there. So I'm going to wait a little bit, but I'm really wanting to go, because every time I think about this, every time I go to the Capitol.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if I can get into the basement and just walk around. I'm sure that they did. In the 80s, there was some upgrades or something. They did some cleaning out of things, and I think that they got thrown away very unceremoniously. Somebody's down there and they're like, oh, there's 2 heads in jars here. We should just maybe throw those in a dumpster. So that feels a little odd to me, but yeah.
But yeah, the most prolific serial killers in Colorado history.
Yeah, and just historical, was it what was the treaty that basically made that area America? Was it the Hidalgo, like Guadalupe Hidalgo?
Yes, exactly.
Treaty, and that's where he found they had a lot of the people in the valley in southern Colorado and even the southern states where they were citizens of Mexico, and then all of a sudden they were citizens of the U.S., and then the U.S. was like, this is our land, don't give it,
Yeah.
It was kind of messed up, right?
Well, and even like right after that, so yeah, that Guadalupe Hidalgo, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is what gave the U.S. that territory. And then they made Colorado a territory, but what they actually did, they actually moved the line when they first signed it. The New Mexico territory went further north than it does.
Yeah.
Now. So they moved it to like the 37th parallel. One, so that it looked better like on a map, just where the line is, but also for the population numbers. They needed those numbers to make Colorado a territory.
Yeah, and I'm totally butchering my history on that right now, so forgive me if I am. But I knew I know the controversy behind it, and when it came to the land part, and that kind of was what sparked this whole thing. Yeah,
I mean, because like I said, they started out being like in the course of these guys' lifetime, they went from being Spaniards to Mexicans to Americans.
Yeah.
And so like the taxes changed, like the agreements changed. They were first promised, and of course, as is our oldest national tradition, they were promised certain land rights that were immediately like, never mind, JK.
Yeah, and then they burned down their house, didn't they? When they wouldn't concede, that's how it went. Like the U.S. government was like, well, screw you, we're going to take this.
Yeah.
And
well,
do all this.
and it was really interesting too, because part of it, I think, just as some of the inequities of it, they actually, when they came through and did like the census, they also had to declare all their arms and ammunition. So part of those census records, we actually know how, and that's the part that no one talks about in any of these reports. Vivian had one gun and like 2 pounds of ammunition, and Felipe didn't declare any weapons. And then when the Union soldiers showed up to fight him, somehow they had rifles and pistols and bows and arrows to fight back with.
So they lost their guns in a boating accident.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, and then they also had they had an 1860 and an 1860 Colt Navy revolver, which had been like one of the first edition Colts ever.
Yeah.
Then 1860 and then 1861. So they had like the octagonal barrel one and then the smooth bore one as well, which I don't know how they would have gotten those. I don't know where they would have ever gotten those.
Huh.
Because really historically, those were the first big sale of those Colt revolvers were to the Navy and then to the Texas Rangers.
So they could have.
So they would have probably had to kill. They would have pulled off a soldier is what they would have done. But I don't know where they got it originally.
So they didn't get it by legal means, is what you're saying.
No,
Probably
didn't
not.
help their reputation a lot. I don't think either.
Well, what was legal at that point? I mean, obviously it was fine to, promise people land and steal it and then assault people and burn things and kill people as long as you were a soldier and as long as you had a gun on you, right? You could do that?
Well, and I mean, to some of the stories that are out there, like with this guy. So when Vivian died, Felipe ran away, but there's a story that he went back. So Tappan cut off his head, took it back to prove that they'd killed him. Felipe went back, buried Vivian's body, but apparently went home with his dried foot as a memento.
Like a good luck foot?
I guess. I don't know if he rubbed it for luck or what, but...
Again, it was a different time. And you can't just take a picture and say, yep, I killed them, so they brought their heads back.
But I mean, why would you keep the foot?
Why would you keep that? Just doesn't even make sense.
Did you wear it as a necklace or
I
something?
think the other thing that's interesting, what you mentioned in their lifetime, but these were all of the Hispanics in that area were Sephardic Jews. They'd come from Spain and Portugal, escaping the Inquisition.
Right.
150 years before that even. So I mean, this was the culture of their culture and their mentality and everything was they had been harassed and persecuted for generations. And so they'd found their place, their safe place.
Especially from a Sephardic Jewish historical standpoint, these guys, they lived on the very, very edge of Spanish territory. They were Spanish citizens. They had come from Spain, and they, as a way to escape the Inquisition, they basically renounced their Jewish heritage, became conversos, became converts to Catholicism, and they went as far away from Spain as they could, and then as far to the edge of that territory as they could as well. I mean, this was the very northern end of that Spanish territory. So and even now, I mean, we grew up with some traditions in our family that if you know what you're looking at, like there's Jewish customs. Even my grandma never once cut bread with a knife, stuff
Never.
like that. Like
It was rude. It was incredibly rude. So go back and tell what the connection is. I mean, besides Espinosa, that whole connection is on that side. So this was the really interesting thing that happened. I'd done some research recently on that, and I kept having this feeling that there was a matriarch.
Oh, no, you tell that part.
Okay. So there's this matriarch. And I just like all the stories and putting together what my grandmother had said and different things. And so there's actually somebody in the San Luis Valley. His name is Bricker. He's, putting a film together. He's writing a film for this and, wants to do it, fairly soon. It's just, COVID put everything behind, put production behind. But, him and I were talking about some of that, the cultural difference between incoming Anglos and the Sephardic Jews who'd been there for all these generations. And I kind of didn't think about it anymore. I just knew. And then our cousin was over at my auntie's house and found a picture, and he sent it over to me. And there's said Grandma Gold on it. And we'll put this on. We'll attach this to this episode when we publish it. But Grandma Gold, and it wouldn't have been a name. It would have been more like a title, that was written on it. And this was she was not fair of feature. We'll say it that way. She was very much
scary looking.
She was scary looking. So the family theory is that there were far more involved in this rampage or this retaliation, as we sort of feel like it was a retaliation, than just Felipe or Vivian or Jose Vicente.
So there was a ringleader. There was somebody from up top, a grandma, taking care of this and giving the orders.
Talking all this through with
theory,
like this filmmaker, and then just understanding kind of the culture of these Sephardic Jews, our own family dynamic. Like, it wouldn't be a far-flung theory to believe that this Grandma Gold or someone like her was actually probably ordered them basically to take care of this.
So have you read the book The Vendetta of Bloody Espinosas?
I've read a couple of books. The Summer of Terror, there's several books out there. We've read a lot of what's out there, we've read a lot of what's out there. Both of us.
It looks like there's a new one that came out recently called The Vendetta of Bloody Espinosas by, this sounds like a totally fake name, Adam James Jones.
Yeah, so I looked at that. I haven't read the book. I think it's like it's historical fiction. I think it's like a dramatized version of the story. But like even telling like my version, like I said, I have no qualms about it because there's not a right version of the story.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to ignore the facts to get the story out of a true event.
Yeah.
And I was curious too, because the guy's like a screenwriter. So I was wondering if he's collaborating. I have no idea, but but they are making a movie of it. Like
and this guy Bricker was telling us there's actually a couple people that are trying to make, like different groups that are trying to make the movie.
Have they ever popped up like in a movie as a character? Like,
No, I don't think so. Like it's a pretty forgotten part of history. Even like there's some pretty extensive histories of Colorado where they're completely left out and they're barely mentioned.
Huh.
Well, it was going on during the Civil War, and we weren't even a country yet, much less a state. Colorado wasn't even a state. We weren't a country. Everybody's paying attention to the Civil War. Even if you look at the it was just kind of a weird thing that they were even through here. Because it's not like you stop in the San Luis Valley. The stops on Oregon Trail or whatever did not go through the San Luis Valley. Yeah,
and just even like the way law enforcement was back then. I mean, there's a story where at one point they deputized like 8 or 9 guys in Park County to try to go after him and stuff like that. But yeah, it wasn't like you called the cops and people were just scared to even go out. Like there was even at the time, the story was so dramatized that people were like scared to leave their house. They wouldn't go anywhere without like actually without military protection. It was the military ran everything out here at the time.
So, when would the Mormons have settled in the San Luis Valley? Can you think?
1850 or so.
So they would have already been there.
Yeah, they would have been part of that. Yeah, because they settled in Utah in 1847. So it wasn't long after that they sent them out here. So 1850, 55 maybe.
Yeah.
And so this started happening in 1863 and 1862 and 1863 is when this happened.
So creepy Colorado stories, one that hits kind of close to us. Now, Brian, what good stories do you have for me?
Yay, Brian.
Yay, Brian.
All right, try not to go over the stuff that we've talked about many times on this before, but we will talk a little bit about that too. But so I was trying to think of some good Pueblo urban legends. I know we talked about the gravesite that glowed and the state hospital and the haunted cemetery and all that. I think I might have briefly mentioned the Honor Farm, but I was trying to think of something back from when I was growing up that was just like terrifying, kind of like the boogeyman. Your parents tell you not to go in the park, or this guy will get you, or whatever. So in Pueblo, we had what was called the Honor Farm, and I don't want to mess this up, so let me pull this up. But basically, it's over by the Nature Center. If you've been to Pueblo, you go to the Nature Center. It's between Pueblo Boulevard and the Nature Center. There's a trail that goes along the river. It is no longer there. Like, they tore it down. They put that telescope up there.
Oh, the building they tore down?
Yeah, it was a weird building. It was kind of like on the plateau right there, but it was kind of built into the shell. So if you're going towards the Nature Center, you know where the telescope's at? There's the observatory. It's right there by the bird sanctuary or whatever that is.
Oh, yeah. The Raptor Center.
Yeah, the Raptor Center. So it's kind of behind that on the other side of the hill. And let me pull this up real fast. So basically, the Honor Farm was it was owned by the state hospital, but at the time, I believe it was called the Pueblo Insane Asylum.
Okay.
So they don't call them that anymore, but the state hospital.
How did it get Honor Farm?
Sanatorium.
Yeah. So it was the Colorado State Insane Asylum purchased a large portion of land that stretched from 11th to 13th Streets near Pueblo Boulevard in 1879. The land was meant to serve as a dairy farm where patients at the asylum could live and work. The farm no longer stands, but the land is said to be inhabited to one of Pueblo's most. Oh wait. I'm reading this totally wrong. I'm trying to read and like improv on it. The farm, I'll just read it directly from the Pueblo chieftain. The farm no longer stands, but the land it once inhabited is said to be one of Pueblo's most haunted spots. Urban legends state that a man sacrificed his nephew as part of a ritual on the land, which in turn caused it to be haunted. An unexplained mist, voices, orbs, and other unexplained phenomenon have been reported by various Southern Colorado paranormal investigations. So that's the chieftain. That's it. But you can't find anything on it. So there's like ghost hunters, ghost chasers, whatever. They've done shows on it. They go and investigate it. But growing up, and my dad was a cop at the time, and he'd always tell us, like, don't go by the Honor Farm. But we'd go down to the Nature Center. So you would walk by. So you're hiking along the river, going from City Park to the Nature Center, and there was this weird wall, and it was very spray painted. And then, of course, being a teenager, and also my aunts and uncles were young too. They're like, oh, they used to practice Satan worship there. They held these rituals, and they sacrificed a baby, and a man went up there and killed his son or his nephew, depending on who you spoke to. And then the story is, and my dad told me this, and I don't know if it was to scare me or it really happened, but he said, there was a standoff with the police and the sheriff's office, and there were Satanists there, and they broke up a ritual and blah, blah, blah. So we'd walk by this thing. And of course it was the 80s. So it was the satanic panic of the 70s and 80s. And when you had all these rumors of cults and Satan worshipers and blah, blah, blah. And, Motley Crue and
that'd be a good
we
name
lived
for
in
a
the
band.
Shire at that time.
Yeah. So
Satanic Panic. That'd be a good name for a band.
I think there's a movie called Satanic Panic.
Oh, really?
Panic that's awesome. And I think there's a band. But
Doesn't
anyway,
sound awesome.
So
I don't like mean shows.
So what do teenagers do? Teenagers do teenage things. So they're spray painting like pentagrams and upside down crosses and like hell Satan and stuff. So as a kid, you're walking by and you look up and you're like, holy cow, that's terrifying. And then of course everybody's telling us like, it's it's haunted, blah, blah, blah. So we go up there, and I remember going up there once with my aunt because she's like, you want to go see this? It's creepy. And I'm like, yeah, let's go see this. So we go up there, and I mean, it was really creepy because it was a dairy, but if you've ever been to a dairy, there's like stalls, you know, where the cows stay, and then there were rooms where the patients would stay too. All like basically high schoolers were partying up there, so it was all burnt up. But it was always, she's like, that's where they sacrificed the baby. You could still see the fire there, and like terrified of this thing. But doing research and going back and looking at it, like, yeah, it seems like some crazy dude went up there. He probably lived there for a time in the state hospital, or probably worked there. And he went up and supposedly killed his nephew there. And that's what caused them to just like shut it off. Now it's been totally razed. Like it's no longer there. But these paranormal investigators and what have you have like said that they've gone up there and filmed mists and lights and orbs and all this stuff. Okay, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Some ghost was haunting.
Where's a ghost haunting us? So the nephew.
Yeah, so supposedly this really happened, and it was just scary, but they say it's haunted. But the place was like really creepy. When you got up there, it was like completely black, spray painted, all this weird Motley Crue pentagrams painted on it and stuff. So that was one. But the other scary one here in Pueblo is just the amount of like, and it's not even paranormal, but you have patients from the state hospital that were allowed to come out. And even to this day, there's still patients that, you know, may not be a risk to themselves or others are considered that walk around. But we had a guy, and he finally passed away. But Cornbread Baca, you guys heard of Cornbread Baca?
No.
So Cornbread Baca was this gentleman that was at the state hospital, I believe. The rumors, you never know what to believe. He murdered millions of people, or, you know, something bad happened. But he used to come around our neighborhood, and as a kid, it was really weird because everybody was scared of him. And the urban legend was that he, you know, killed his family or killed these people, but was deemed insane and was living at the state hospital, but was allowed to come out. And so even if you Google it on the chieftain, I think he passed away maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But he's one of these urban legends that you don't know what's true, what's not true, but the legend itself kind of grew into this almost mystical figure that's this serial killer that walked around Pueblo and still was murdering people, but they couldn't lock him up because he was insane. Now, as a kid hearing that, when your dad, who is a cop, says, like, stay away from that guy, he kills people, it's like terrifying. And he actually died in 2017. He is a notorious Pueblo crime legend, Cornbread Baca, dead at 84. And this is him. I don't know if you could see it. kind of creepy.
Yeah.
He has the glasses.
He's got the crazy eyes.
I think I recognize him.
So this guy would walk around my house all the time. And there was a few times we talked to him. He came up and talked to us. We were like playing in the front yard. And then we find out who he is. But it was real creepy to know. Again, it was a legend. You don't know what was true or what was not. But let's go to the chieftain to hear about Mr. Baca. He was a notorious Pueblo crime figure whose half-century career in lawbreaking, coupled by the uncanny ability to skirt charges and dodge incarceration, made him the stuff of local legend. The torrid tale, however, came to an end September 27th, when at age 84, Cornbread Baca died of natural causes in the custody of the Colorado Department of Corrections, where he was incarcerated on charges of murder, robbery, and theft. Jeez. The readers of the Pueblo Chieftain, which extensively chronicled Baca and his illegal exploits beginning in 1966, Cornbread became a near household nickname. A devil-may-care, short in stature rebel who thrived on living outside of society's rules and for whom prison bars were but an inconvenient speed bump on the outlaw's highway. Baca's press clipping file, like his rap sheet, is as thick as thieves, a nefarious log that began with a marijuana possession conviction of 1954. Ooh, that's really scary. And progressed to include accounts of burglary, aggravated robbery, narcotics possession, witness tampering, assault, hit and run, illegal possession of a weapon, and first-degree murder. Baca's history similarly is rife with arrests, posted bails, trials, mistrials, change of venues, guilty and not guilty verdicts, acquittals, sentences, resentences, parole revocations, penitentiary stretches, even an escape from prison. Long before New York City crime boss John Gotti earned the nickname of Teflon Don, Baca's reputation of seeing nothing stick was already firmly in hand. Whether through luck, brawny legal representation, lack of witness cooperation, sympathetic testimony, and continual capacity to make bail, loopholes in the system, or any combination thereof, Baca enjoyed more than his share of life on the outside. Oh, of course, something happens, and the chieftain, it blocked me. Anyway, loopholes in the system or any combination thereof, Baca enjoyed more than his share of life on the outside despite an obvious propensity for violence and mayhem. Elusive, how does a longtime criminal continually evade custody, blared the chieftain headline from April 1997, which is about when he was walking around my front yard because I was in high school and the other kids were younger. Well, another, 1983's local corrections board angered at release of convicted killer, so he had killed somebody by that point.
Jeez.
Yeah. Effectively summarized the frustration of many law enforcer and correctional officials through the years. Baca's happy-go-lucky attitude toward crime and punishment is perhaps best personified in a press clipping from July 23, 1966. Captioned, short but sweet. Here is a big smiling Baca, arms outstretched, jokes with Pueblo police officers after his arrest on escape from a medium security facility in Canyon City. Baca told police his 16-day freedom had been short but sure sweet, and that he was tired of running, notes the clipping. Patricia Hill, who recently retired after a 30-year career in Pueblo County Jail, recalled Baca as a detainee who commanded respect and demanded a spotless wing. I remember walking into the wing after I'd first started, not knowing what to expect, Hill said. And there was Cornbread, mop in hand. He simply told me, good morning. I remembered that he was always cleaning that wing. And at least toward me, Cornbread was always respectful. If somebody said anything disrespectful to me, he gave them the stink eye, and that was it. So basically, that goes on. Basically, again, this is an urban legend. In Pueblo, there was this guy that supposedly murdered a bunch of people, was terrible, and he couldn't stay in jail. And he was walking around neighborhoods, and he would say hi. We were playing outside one day, and he came up and talked to his kids. I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? And then my parents saw and came out and was like, what the, you know what? Get out of here.
Where did he get the name Cornbread?
I don't know.
I've been wondering
maybe
that this
he likes
entire
cornbread.
time.
Maybe he has this really good recipe for it or something.
But that is.
Did it? Oh, look at him. This is a great photo.
That's him right there.
That's a scary detail.
Oh my gosh.
And then the article ends with Baca, Solis continued, always treated people fairly. Because of his reputation, people probably feared and respected him. But he didn't mess with nobody that didn't mess with him. There are certain people you shouldn't be messing with, and he definitely was one of them.
This sounds like the most Puebloan that's ever Puebloed.
Yeah, and there's a few of those. But that one's in reality. I mean, that's an urban legend based off of somebody that's actually out there.
Wow.
Pueblo.
So Pueblo, that's incredible. Did it say that he escaped a maximum security prison in Canyon City and then decided that he was just tired, so he turned himself in?
Yeah, it was a medium security prison, which is like a prison. So medium security is like the actual prison, low security is like the camp and stuff like that. But medium security, you're in prison. Maximum security is where you're locked up in a cell, 23 hours a day.
Did it say how he escaped?
He probably just walked off. I mean, it happens. And see, this is where like the legend and the facts don't quite mix, but I kind of like the legend more because we always thought that he was at the state hospital, which used to be the Colorado Insane Asylum, and did the Honor Farm. So there was always this weird thing about the state hospital, and it's weird when you drive by it still to this day. And they're great. Like everybody that works there is great. They do a good job of what they're doing, and with limited resources and funding. But when you go by, there are people standing out there, and they're probably residents of the state hospital that are allowed to leave. So, and I don't know this for a fact or not. This could be somebody that's in there for drug and alcohol counseling, maybe. I'm not saying they're bad people, but as a kid growing up, your parents say, no, there's people in there that are insane that they can't keep locked up legally, and they allow them to leave. So you got to be careful because there's murderers and serial killers out in the community that are crazy that are just allowed to walk free. And so we always thought that was Cornbread Baca. That's the thing. Is like, the state hospital lets him out all the time. I think it was other stuff, but again, he did kill somebody and was just walking around like mine, like nobody's business. Yeah. Like, yep. Hey, I've been in jail a lot of times. I killed somebody can I have a hamburger?
And in Pueblo, the answer is yes.
Yeah. So there's that one, and there's a multitude of creepy stories here. The cattle mutilations. So this is we talked about this before, how you had Snippy the horse, which was actually really named Lucky. I think it was in 1967. There was this horse, and I believe it was Alamosa, or in the valley, that died and its lungs were removed, and the standard cattle mutilation stuff. So I started reading into it more because there's actually FBI documents and ATF documents that go down this. So if nobody knows, or you didn't listen to the last one where we did this, cattle mutilation had been going on for a while. So I think since the 1600s back in England, there were accounts of it, but it never really there was no investigation into it. It was like, somebody killed my cow, or, coyotes got my cow, whatever. So this horse dies, they find it, and it's mutilated, cut up, and in a surgical way. So that prompted an investigation. At that time in the 60s, up into the early 70s, you had New Mexico, Colorado, Illinois, I think Nebraska were seeing this like rash of cattle mutilations, to the point where it was millions of dollars of cattle had been lost. Now, think back at this time, this is when the federal government was kind of over-regulating the cattle industry, so it was tough to be a farmer or an ag producer when it comes to cattle. So some people are saying, it's the farmers saying this to say that they're losing money for insurance write-off. That was a big one. But there was a senator at the time in Colorado that said, this is the most important thing in Colorado that's impacting this. And New Mexico kind of said the same thing, because the ranchers, it's like, hey, I lost 100 head of cattle last month because they were mutilated. We find these bodies, no blood around them. Their soft tissues are cut out. It's like their tongue, their lungs, their genitals, all this stuff. So the FBI starts to investigate, and they deem that, to be honest, they kind of do a half-assed job on it. And one of the reasons why was the investigator didn't like to look at mutilated cattle. So he would send like the local experts, like, go check that out. And the FBI deemed, no, this was, everything could be explained. It was, predators. But again, at this time, there was the satanic panic of the 70s and 80s. So it started kind of going around the press that this was the job of cult members. Mm-hmm. So they thought it was satanic sacrifices. So then into the 70s and 80s, you hear stories of, hooded figures standing in a field, and then the farmer runs to catch them, and they run away, and then they find a cow that's mutilated. So that's all fine. I kind of give that to just people saying things or seeing things. Like, I might have seen like a dude out there, and that turns into like, I saw 3 dudes out there, and then Micah says he saw some robed people out there doing this. Well, when the FBI is doing this investigation, the ATF does an investigation, and nobody really talks about this. So this was out of New Mexico because it was a huge problem, and it was financially impacting these people. You had U.S. Congress involved, the FBI, and the ATF. So the ATF, separate from the FBI, started this prior to the FBI, and they were finding them, and 95% of the cattle that they were recovering that had been reported as mutilated and investigating it, they said that it was all predators, right? It's obvious. They even did experiments where they'd kill a cow, basically, and then drop it into a field and see what would happen, watch it for 2 days. And it was kind of like that. Like, it's gross, but the cow splits, the skin splits. It looks like it was sliced open. Yeah. The animals, they go for the eyes, the tongue, the soft tissue first. Blood, once the heart stops beating, it coagulates in the cow, so nothing leaks out. So that's explainable. But in 5% of these, the ATF found that there were tranquilizer chemicals present in them. Like, that's a fact. Like, this isn't like hearsay or anything. They said in a small number of these mutilations, there were evidence of a tranquilizer being used on the cow. And then they noticed over the years they're investigating it that the mutilations became more precise and more skillful. So around this time, you have a doctor in Trinidad who kind of put Trinidad on the map, and I forget his name, but everybody knows.
Of course.
It's the sex change doctor, right? Right. And that itself is like a way different story than people think. He basically, during the time he saw that people were going to illegal doctors to get illegal sex changes, and they were just messing it up. Right. And what he said, no, I'm going to fix this. Like, so that's why people came to Trinidad that had gone through a sex change operation and were just literally butchered. And his thought was, I'm going to fix this for these people, and I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to offer it.
Well, Tony Haas told us he knew him, and that he gave a ton of, that particular doctor gave a ton of free care, and just anybody needed any kind of care.
Yes.
He would provide it regardless of their ability to pay, which was amazing.
Yeah. So that's where that came. And then, of course, Trinidad gets the whole reputation of like, oh, go to Trinidad, get a sex change. But it was not that.
So, okay, cattle mutilations.
So he actually, this doctor, examined some of these cattle, and this would have been in the 80s, I believe. And he told the investigators and told people, he was like, no, this is 100% a surgical operation. This is not predators. This is not, he didn't say aliens. It's not aliens, but somebody did this to the cow. So, okay, at this time too, so you have reports now, and that a farmer sees a cattle mutilated, and they see, there's one where it was like 3 glowing orbs. So then that story starts to spread, and around 1984-ish, there's a doctor, a Harvard professor type, I don't know what school, I think it was Harvard or somewhere like that, some Ivy League school that had been following this. And she said, no, this is aliens, because the reports were seeing all these lights. And at the same time, farmers and ranchers are seeing unmarked black helicopters. So then this report comes in from Nebraska, because the farmers are pissed off that somebody's mutilating their cows. They don't care if it's coyotes or Satanists, aliens, the government, whatever. So they're starting to report black helicopters. And in the valley, they're seeing black helicopters as well that are coming down, and, they'll see one hovering, they'll go to the spot, and they'll find a mutilated cow. So at this time, the FBI is like, nope, it's all predators, whatever. So this kind of grows this distrust in the government, because now the rumor's going around, okay, this isn't aliens, this isn't Satanists, this is the government doing it. And there's 2 reasons why the government was doing it, according to these people. One, they wanted to see how far a cow-based disease is spread, like anthrax. Mm-hmm. So they said the government was infecting cattle with like mad cow disease or anthrax or something like that illegally, and they were tracking it. So they were dropping down and picking up cows to track the progress of a virus that they created, or they were trying to stop, and they didn't want to get in trouble. The other one was that they were testing nuclear weapons in White Sands, the White Sands area, Los Alamos, like all those places down in New Mexico. And they messed up because they didn't know how far the radiation would go. So the government and the Air Force and the Department of Energy is like, crap, we got to see how far we polluted the environment. So they were, they're jumping in helicopters like, okay, go a little far north, grab some cows, get the soft tissue as fast as you can, and we'll get out of there to see if radiation. So during all this, then you have this paranoia that the government's like spreading diseases, or the land is poisoned and they're not admitting it. It got so bad that these posses that the ag producers were forming started shooting at National Guard helicopters. So all along, and this actually adds to the intrigue and mystery, and then adds more to it. So in the valley, all the way up to Nebraska to New Mexico, this is a training area for flying, for fighter jets, for helicopters. This is where they practice their maneuvers. There's also some OP-4, which is opposing force. So you might see a Russian helicopter flying around because they're testing it and seeing how it does. So now I'm this farmer looking up, and I'm seeing all these government helicopters and a Russian plane or something. So they start shooting at it. So the National Guard actually has to change the window where they fly, because their helicopters, they're afraid, are going to get shot down by farmers and ranchers. Now, during this entire time, up until 2 months ago, cattle are still being mutilated. It still happens, and it happens in specific areas. So again, the attitude of the government on this is that it's farmers and ranchers trying to claim insurance, or they lost this, right?
Yeah.
So they think they're going out and shooting them or letting them die and saying oh, somebody mutilated my cow. I need my insurance for this, which I don't think is actually happening.
Every time that there's a claim like that, there's an investigation.
Yeah. So that I doubt that's happening. But the other is there was another case that was recently, and I say recent, like in the past 15 years, that there were 6 cows, and this was, I believe, in the Trinidad area, kind of that part of the state, not in Trinidad, but somewhere around the county. And then there was one in the valley, and then there was one in northern Colorado, where they found these cattle, these 6 cattle, 6 different situations over about 5 years that were laid out, and there were tools where they were being cut open. So the farmer like heard something, saw something, went out there, somebody ran, they couldn't find him, or maybe they didn't even see him, but there was literally like a cow that was mid being mutilated and like surgically operated on.
That is so bizarre, because if you're doing that, just pick up the cow and take it with you. Why just leave it out there?
There was one specific.
They have a helicopter.
There was specifically one where somebody said it was in a barn and on a table.
Whoa.
That they found, and that the people got out of there so fast they didn't even see him. But it was like there were footprints, and it was still warm in there. Like the cow had just been killed and sliced open. And this is in recent times, so that adds to it. And then again, you have all the UFO sightings and all this. So people are like, it's aliens in the valley. It's aliens coming down getting our cats. It's the government. It's Satanists. Nobody, to this day, nobody knows. And in that report by the ATF, and even in the FBI one, you could get all the records of it. Like there's legitimate like numbers on it saying that, hey, there's a few of these that, yeah, this wasn't a coyote. This is like something's going on here. And that spans over years. And nobody's been able to solve what's actually doing this.
So I guess that's leads back to my question. Where are these cows at? Like, did whoever was investigating them come and pick them up and take them away? Did they?
No, they're down there. Like the problem is like if you cut open a cow and take parts out of it, it's gone in 2 days. Like something will eat it and all that, which makes it tough. Like that's why if it's a predator. Again, if a cow's there for 2 days, its tongue's gonna be eaten out. It's like its soft parts, as you would say, are gone. But now we have cases where they were up there while the cow's still like, not even been gone for like an hour, and there's evidence of this too. But those, to the best of my knowledge, have not been investigated, at least not publicly. But all the other ones from the 67 all the way up into the late 80s, the FBI and the ATF looked at it. And again, you could find it's a FOIA request. Somebody released this. Or like, it was a predator. It was a coyote. Like, there's no evidence of this, blah, blah, blah. But there are some that something weird's going on where somebody or something is actually doing this. And it's not a coyote. It's not predators.
Okay, Brian, what do you think actually happened?
Aliens.
I think if I'd have to put my money on it, I think that, just like suspend disbelief and say that, like a small percentage of these, somebody did something, right? I think the rest of it is predators, and it's just the word like, it's like the chupacabra, right? Like,
The thought crossed my mind.
Yeah, but if I were, and I know how the government thinks, especially back then, it's like, oh shoot, we like totally messed up.
Right.
Like we might be poisoning American citizens. Let's see how bad it is without saying it. Because the second they say, the Department of Energy or say the Air Force say, okay, we tested all these nuclear bombs and we actually kind of poisoned a lot of this land with radiation. That's just going to open up this huge door. We saw it at, the nuclear tests in where Area 51 is at, like Nellis Air Force Base, where they were testing this in Las Vegas. Like they denied that for years that they were doing that. Right. And it wasn't until recently that if you were there during the test that your wife and your family could be compensated, because all these dudes that were like around in the service, they're watching bombs explode. Like the government never acknowledged that because it was just this huge door that Pandora's box would be open on this. Now you do get compensated financially from the Department of Energy over a lawsuit and them opening this up. So imagine if they did that, say they were testing these bombs and missiles or whatever in New Mexico, and they're like, holy cow, like the air brought this up to Colorado and like maybe even northern Colorado or like, the San Luis Valley. So they're like, before they say something that it's poison, they're going to say like, go get some cows that are eating the grass and see how bad it is. So if I put money on it, I would think it's that. I don't think it's like a virus they're tracking, because that was another big one, that it was like they were breeding anthrax in cows and taking it. But again, like, I don't want to accuse the government of doing this. But at the same time, they did some shady stuff back then, even up until not too long ago.
I say aliens.
Or it could be aliens. That's the other thing.
Chupacabra.
Oh, yeah.
No, that makes the most sense, because I'm like, why cows? Like, why would you mutilate a cow? Like, that doesn't seem like a fun thing to do to me.
Because if you want to test the
Tipping
land.
them, that seems like fun.
Well, think of it this way.
Them?
So much harder than it sounds.
Say this is like, yeah, it is. Say this table is
No
like
experience on
a
that.
big swath of land that's is like 100 miles or whatever, and you want to get soil samples secretly and like sample what's there. How are you going to do it? A cow just like grazes here for this area forever. You go in and get a cow and see what it's been eating and if it's sick. And then you move to the next patch and see what they are. So if you're tracking where something's spread, if you dropped, say, a nuclear bomb right here, you know, let's test a cow here. Let's test a cow here. Because they drink the water, they eat the food. They can't go in and test people, because the people would be like, what the hell are you testing us for?
Yeah.
Why are you, I'm in it like Alamosa. Why are you testing me for radiation?
And people want to keep their soft tissue.
Yeah, that too. There is that. You don't want to go mutilate some San Luis Valley people at the behest of tests. But I think that if 100 years from now they look back and say, like, that's probably what happened. Or it's aliens. That's the other thing. It could be aliens. I mean, supposedly there's a lot of aliens in the San Luis Valley. I think I've met a few of them.
I have no doubt you have.
Just like there's demons here in Pueblo, because I met a few of them too.
Oh my goodness, Brian. I'm sure you have. And I live in the Shire, so I don't.
Hey, that place is haunted up there too. They see all those lights and stuff.
No, but
Rye is haunted?
No, it's aliens. Right, in Rye, it's aliens.
Oh, it's aliens.
Rye's, it's not,
because they always see
haunted.
the lights out there, right?
Yeah, they're aliens.
Who sees lights in Rye?
I've seen lights in Rye.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
Really?
It's a big thing.
Are you guys sure those aren't the stars or something?
No,
well, I mean, it probably is, but the wet mountain lights, is that what it's called? The wet mountain blue lights or whatever, and then there's the Silver Cliff lights.
Because they do all of those. Well, they do a lot of training maneuvers over there, but there's also lights. Is there anybody that there's not a single person that I know
this is brand new information to me.
Hasn't seen lights up there.
Yeah,
we've all seen them.
Big deal.
Haven't you not? You've never seen them when you were camping.
I just assumed those were the stars or airplanes.
I'm going to Google it right now.
No, it's a thing. I've seen them.
No, I'm serious. I've never heard. I have no idea what you're talking about, dude.
Really?
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh my gosh! Like, go back a couple of years on Facebook where there were lights coming back from. Yeah. I saw lights not that long ago. I'm like, that light. What is that light doing up there? Does nobody else see this light? This was like a couple months ago.
What do you think? What did you tell your brain that was, just to like reconcile what you were seeing?
I was thinking maybe there was a helicopter hovering over there with a light on. There was no explanation.
Maybe that's my problem. I'm just boring. I'm just like, oh, that's just a plane.
Well, according to Ghosts of America, most of the locals in Rye, Colorado, are happily unaware of the horrible mysteries this city keeps.
What? Keep going.
That's all. This is all it says.
Oh,
dude,
what other mysteries? That's
I don't know.
Plural.
Yeah, no, there's mysteries. I think we need to get Billy on the show.
That's the mystery.
That's the mystery.
Because it's like Rye. It's the wet mountain.
Beulah,
it's the wet mountain. They see the lights, and then in Custer County has, I think it's the Silver Cliff lights that they see out there, and they actually studied that one because they thought it was like a fault, like a geological fault.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a geological thing
that somehow ignited like plasma. You have to understand too that in Colorado, we have the Garden of the Gods. So if you look at Garden of the Gods, it's this starting around there, but it goes up the Front Range. It's these red rocks that stick out of the ground and all the way up to Golden and, that area by Chatfield Reservoir, by Red Rocks.
Yeah.
Ironically aptly named Red Rocks. So that's one of the oldest formation of rocks that stick out of the earth. like on the planet. And you have a lot of aerospace contractors up there that were going to be like missile launch sites and all this. And the reason for that is there's a property to these rocks where it has quartz in it, so it blocks radio signals, cell phone signals, and all that. Like, it's not on purpose or on accident that they built this stuff there, because in the idea that somebody's trying to, listen in or something, like they can't, because quartz has what do you call it? Like an electromagnetic frequency in it that disrupts stuff.
Magnetic striations.
Yes, that's what it is. That's why a quartz crystal on your watch, that's why they use that. And, NORADs. And they're also in Colorado. So the reason why all the space stuff is here is because you can have a satellite. You could basically have first line of communication to see around the world. So we're on this area that, a satellite way over here on the horizon and way over here on the horizon can almost see all the way around the world. So it's not because it's like, the most safe for a nuclear attack. It's just, it makes sense when you're talking to satellites in space. We're in the perfect spot here in Colorado for communication.
Well, and that's why all the alien activity here as well, because they're using the same stuff that our modern technology uses. They figured it out. It's in the geology of Colorado.
Could be.
Geology is a pseudoscience anyway.
Oh my gosh, it is not. So all these creepy Colorado things, truth is stranger than fiction, all of it makes colorful Colorado. We appreciate you joining us for this special edition of Making Action Happen, the Halloween edition. It's because all the creepy stuff is a little too true here. We will see you next time. Elections are coming up really quick.
That is scary. So the scariest story we could talk about is the election coming up and what's going to happen after that.
We don't know, and we were going to try to predict, but I think we gave it up.
No, we're going to do that today.
Oh, we're going to do it today.
We'll put it on the show. So as soon as we turn this off, I'm going to write, we're going to go up, put in an envelope, certain election, who's going to win, and then on the show, we're going to unfold it and see who got the closest. Yep. We won't say who picked what, though. We'll just say...
Yes, we will.
Yeah, we'll see.
No, because I don't want to hurt any
have
feelings.
to, Brian.
Oh, that's fair. No, he's right. Of course he's right.
No, what we'll do is we'll just say who was the
right.
rightest and who was the wrongest. We won't say who.
I'm
going to be the wrongest. That just hurt your face, didn't it?
Well, no.
The use of the word?
I'm okay with that.
The wrongest is...
Yeah, you're the wrongest.
Okay.
Strategery.
Yeah. It's nonsensical.
I can't handle any more of this scary language. We'll see you guys next time.
All right.
Bye.